Hey everybody, Mr. Maupin coming at you here with another APUSH video. This time we're taking a look at topic 5.11, which is entitled The Failure of Reconstruction. And so far we've talked about Reconstruction in terms of the battle over what that plan should be it the White House's plan, Congress's plan, and we looked at a number of accomplishments that are going to be associated with Reconstruction. The passage of the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. There's going to be a real attempt by Northern Republicans to try to reshape the South in a way that's going to provide more opportunity for Black Americans and try to crush the old plantation-style system that had served as the motivation for the seceding states in the Civil War. So kind of keep in mind that there are going to be some important achievements. As you can see here in the notes, we're talking about, for the first time, we are expanding suffrage in a real way. Okay, so we're talking about not just expanding voting rights to Black males, but also making sure that there's universal white male suffrage, which was not guaranteed in every southern state at that point. So you are seeing this universal male suffrage that is now starting to emerge. We're also going to be seeing women getting more protection for property rights. We're going to be seeing, the railroads coming to the South for the first time in a real way. We're starting to see the creation of real functional public school systems in southern states where previously they were pretty ramshackle. Generally still up into the Civil War, if you wanted a formal education, you had to pay for it through tutoring. So there's going to be lots of things that are going to be available that are going to be attempts to kind of change and reform some parts of the South. We're going to see a few factories starting to pop up, not a ton, but a few, starting to become slightly more urbanized in some of the parts, like Atlanta and cities like that. So we're starting to see some changes. However, there's going to be tons and tons of problems in these reconstructed, southern states. Even though we're going to have in some of these states significant African American representation in a way that seemed just inconceivable just a decade earlier, we're also going to be seeing a lot of these southern governments associated with massive levels of corruption. Now, as we said previously, the 1870s was known as the era of good stealings, and that was just kind of ubiquitous throughout all levels of government across the entire country. But southern governments in particular had a major problem with it, state governments and local governments, in part due to the fact that you have got folks that are now in government, be it Black Americans or poor white Americans that had never been in government before, that are not really experienced. And this is going to create challenges and temptations for bribery and dysfunctional government that is going to kind of hamstring the effectiveness of some of these southern governments. And in fact, when we look at the corruption and to some degree of incompetence in these southern governments, this is only going to kind of breathe some life into what we're going to start to call the Redeemer movement in the South. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. Now, another problem that is certainly going to be cropping up, not to sound punny, is the issues of sharecropping. Now you got to remember, the vast majority of Black Americans, when they gain their freedom in the South, they have nothing. They have no formal education. They have no property. They have no money. Their only experience is, for the most part, serving as laborers, in many cases, field laborers. Well, once we see emancipation happen and Reconstruction start to happen, the question then becomes, if you're Black, okay, where do I go? Where does my future take me? Well, once again, you don't have money, you don't have land, and you have limited skills, and the skills involve farm laboring. So what's going to happen? The vast majority of Black Americans are going to be staying in the South, not moving up north. They don't have connections up north. They don't have land. They don't have money. Yeah, there's going to be a few that will go out to the plains as exodusters, but the vast majority are going to stay in the South. This is where their families are from. These are areas that they know, and will hire them for work. In fact, remember in some of these communities where they had, very strict black codes. They had rules on the books that said that you had to actually be employed as a black American. And so this is going to give rise to the idea of, well, if all I know how to be is a field farmer, then I'm just going to continue to do that. Now, pre-Civil War, that would be in the form of slavery. Now, under Reconstruction, following emancipation, this is going to come in the form of sharecropping. And as you can see here on this map of the South, you can see in the darker red areas, this is where you're going to see a stronger prevalence and preponderance of sharecropping going on. Now, granted, some of the sharecroppers are going to be poor whites, no question about that, but a majority of the sharecroppers, at least at this time, are going to be black former slaves. And sharecropping is going to be, or tenant farming, which is another term for this, is going to be just unbelievably exploitative in terms of the effects that it will have economically on black Americans. So kind of let's just set the stage here in terms of what this would look like, okay? So if you are an African American and you're looking to farm, because that's really the only skills that you have, you need land to farm upon, right? Well, remember, you don't own any land, so you have to go to a local landowner. Now, that local landowner, in many, many cases, was your former slave owner. So you've got folks that are going to be going to the former master, if you will, to be able to try to farm on, in many cases, the same land they worked on as slaves. Now, the landowner is looking for people to do the farming because they don't have slaves anymore. But note, they are going to take advantage of this situation, to try to maximize their profits. So basically, the landowner will tell the African American sharecropper, listen, you can rent this land to farm on, but it's going to cost you a certain percentage of your crop. It might be 1/3 of your crops I get as the landowner. But you don't really have too many options, because what else are you going to do? You don't have an educational background to give you too many options, so you take what is given to you. So okay, now you've got land to farm, but you don't have anything to farm with. You don't have seed. You don't have farming equipment. You need all those things. And guess what? The landowner is not going to just let you borrow those things. So you have to go to a local merchant to be able to buy the seed, buy the tools, all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, as we've said before, you don't have any money. So what happens is that the local merchant is going to loan you these items, the seed, the tools, etc., at a very high interest rate. Take a look at this here. Sometimes upwards of 60% interest rates to be able to, borrow these things. And note, since you don't have any money, all of this is on credit. So basically the idea being is that you are now indebted to the local merchant, and the only thing that you have to be able to pay off that debt are crop sales. Okay? So now you're in a very, very tight situation. You have a lien on the property because you owe the merchant money. And don't forget, you also owe the landowner money. And so what happens is that in many cases, due to the amount of money that is owed to the landowner and the outrageous amount of debt that is owed to local merchants, you're going to see black Americans paying all of their crop profits to these folks and not being able to make any money for themselves. And in fact, what is commonly going to be happening is that these tenant farmers are not going to be able to even make a profit off of crop sales, and therefore will stay in this continuous continuous circumstance of indebtedness. Now, add to the mix that many southern states are going to be passing laws, at least early on, that will make it illegal for an African American to leave property that they are a tenant farmer on until all debts are paid. So what does this do if you find yourself in this continuous cycle of debt as a tenant farmer? Well, what this is basically slavery 2.0. And you are stuck there in this cycle of debt. Now, technically you are free, but the laws are basically binding you to the land to some degree. It's kind of a sense of serfdom, if you will, in the mid-19th century. So this is a major problem that's going to be engulfing many African Americans after the war. But of course, this is not going to be the only problems. It's not just going to be economic exploitation that's going to be existing, but a very real desire by Southern white Democrats to take back their states, to redeem their governments. The idea being is that, from the mindset of these Southern white Democrats, is that these Northern Yankees have come down and have imposed what they consider to be an unnatural form of government, giving black people the right to vote, the right to black people to hold public office. And, this was seen as this was unnatural, that this is supposed to be white people's jobs and responsibilities. And then when you add to the mix that a lot of these Southern governments were dysfunctional and corrupt, this is only going to add fuel to the fire, the idea that, well, what is right, what is just, what needs to be done? Well, for many, it's the idea of taking back Southern state governments with white Democrats, particularly wealthy white Democrats, to kind of, readjust the ship, to get it back on course, to really run Southern governments the way that they should be, at least from that perspective. And, there's this growing sentiment among Southern white Democrats that, there is a desire to take it back. And as that is happening, there's also a growing national, attitude as we go through the 1870s of, well, how many more years do we have to enforce Reconstruction at bayonet point? For how long do we have to, use the military to guarantee the rights for black Americans, especially given the fact that white Americans, North and South, are outrageously racist by contemporary standards. So these are folks that don't view black Americans as their equals anyway from a social perspective. So they're kind of getting sick and tired over time of like, how much more money, how much more time, how many more soldiers do we have to send into the South to kind of maintain this new order if Southern whites are absolutely opposed to it and adamantly are going to be actively fighting against it. And evidence of actively fighting against it is going to come in the form of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is going to be emerging as a straight up terrorist organization following the end of the Civil War. Now, the basic goal of the initial Ku Klux Klan was to try to restore the old social, political, economic order of the South pre-Civil War with, whites on top and blacks on the bottom. And to do that, these folks will engage in some very brutal, horrific tactics. The use of lynchings, the use of burning down houses and property. These folks would hide their identity as a means to try to, avoid arrest. But they were starting to now, kind of show in a very brutal fashion the resentment that Southern white Democrats had in terms of what were attempts at changing their way of life. And they were going to take it out on blacks. They were going to take it out on white Republicans. They're going to take it out on carpetbaggers and scallywags and all those kinds of folks. And so you're going to see what will be actually thousands over the course of Reconstruction, thousands of people, overwhelmingly black Americans, that are going to be victims of murder as a result of the actions of the Ku Klux Klan and related associated groups. So we got a real problem going on here in the South in terms of a very clear desire to take back government, take back society, put blacks in a subservient position, exercise, the Republicans' presence in the South, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to leave it there for right now. When we come back, we got one more video on Reconstruction, which is going to talk about the sad, tragic final end of Reconstruction. So we'll leave it there. Till next time.